Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship and watched the massive space station grow larger. Harmony Station Academy looked like a giant flower made of metal and glass, floating in the darkness of space. Its white walls sparkled with soft blue lights, and Jake could see other ships moving around it like tiny insects. The transport pilot, a small green alien with 4 arms, kept looking back at Jake nervously. Every few minutes, the pilot would check his instruments and mutter something in his own language. Jake tried to smile at him, but this only made the pilot more worried. "First human student," the pilot said in broken English. "Very exciting, very scary." Jake did not understand why everyone seemed so afraid of him. He was just a regular 17-year-old kid from Colorado. Sure, he played football and liked hiking, but he was not scary. At least he did not think he was scary. The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Jake grabbed his backpack and followed the pilot through a long tunnel that connected to the station. The tunnel was made of some kind of clear material, and Jake could see space all around him. It was beautiful, but also made him feel very small. When they reached the station, Jake stepped into a huge room with a ceiling so high he could barely see the top. The floor was made of something that looked like mother of pearl and felt soft under his feet. Strange plants with glowing leaves grew in pots along the walls, and the air smelled like flowers and rain. Other students moved through the room, but they were nothing like the kids back home. Jake saw a group of tall, thin beings that looked like they were made of living crystal. Their bodies caught the light and threw tiny rainbows on the walls. Near them, some students that looked like giant butterflies floated just above the ground, their wings barely moving. In one corner, Jake spotted what looked like walking trees with silver bark and leaves that tinkled like wind chimes when they moved. Another group looked like they were made of water, their bodies shifting and flowing as they talked to each other. All of them stopped what they were doing when Jake walked in. The crystal beings made a sound like tinkling glass. The butterfly creatures backed away, their wings fluttering nervously. Even the tree-like students seemed to lean away from him. Jake felt his face turn red. He was used to being stared at because he was tall for his age, but this was different. These students looked at him like he was a monster. "You must be Jake Morrison," said a voice behind him. Jake turned around and saw the strangest creature yet. It was about 8 feet tall and looked like it was made of smoke and starlight. Its body shifted between solid and see-through, and when it moved, tiny lights sparkled around it like fireflies. "I am Veltar, the station administrator," the being said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes and whispered secrets. "Welcome to Harmony Station Academy." "Thank you," Jake said, trying not to stare. "It is nice to be here." Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter. "I hope you will still think so after a few days. Come, let me show you to your room." They walked through halls that curved and twisted like the inside of a seashell. The walls were covered with art that moved and changed as Jake watched. One painting showed a forest where the trees grew upside down, their roots reaching toward a sky full of swimming fish. Another showed cities floating in clouds of purple gas. The academy hosts students from 47 different worlds, Veltar explained as they walked. Each species brings their own culture, their own way of learning, their own gifts. "What about humans?" Jake asked. "What gifts do we bring?" Veltar stopped walking and turned to look at him. The lights in its body flickered faster. "That is what we hope to discover. Humans are new to the Galactic Federation. Your species has only been part of our community for 5 years. You are the first human student we have had." They passed a group of students who looked like living gems. When they saw Jake, they made a sound like breaking glass and hurried away in the other direction. Jake watched them go and felt his stomach twist. "They seem afraid of me," he said quietly. "They are," Veltar replied. "Your planet is classified as a Class 12 death world. Most of our students come from Class 1 or Class 2 worlds where life is gentle and safe. The idea of someone from a death world is very frightening to them." Jake did not understand. Earth did not seem like a death world to him. Sure, there were bears and poisonous snakes and hurricanes, but people dealt with those things every day. It was just normal life. They reached a door that looked like all the others, but when Veltar touched it, the door recognized Jake and slid open. Inside was a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out at the stars. Everything was built for someone Jake's size, which surprised him. We had to reinforce the floor and furniture, Veltar said, as if reading his mind. Standard station materials are not designed for Deathworld physiology. Jake sat on the bed carefully. It felt solid enough, but he could hear the frame creaking under his weight. Back home, he was not even considered very big for his age. Your classes begin tomorrow, Veltar continued. Physical education is your first class. Instructor Zixthal is very nervous about having you in the class. Perhaps you could be extra careful not to hurt anyone. I would never hurt anyone, Jake said, confused. Why would I hurt anyone? Veltar's lights flickered again. Of course, not. But what seems gentle to you might not seem gentle to others. Your instructor is from Silk Haven, a world with gravity 1/10 of Earth's. What feels like a light touch to you could be quite powerful to her. After Veltar left, Jake unpacked his few belongings and looked out the window at the stars. He thought about his friends back home, probably getting ready for football practice or hanging out at the mall. He wondered if coming here was a mistake. A soft chime sounded and Jake looked at the small device Veltar had given him. It was a message from his parents, asking how his first day went. Jake started to write back, then stopped. How could he explain that everyone here was afraid of him, that even walking across a room made him feel like a monster? Instead, he wrote, "Everything is fine. The station is amazing. I will write more tomorrow." As he got ready for bed, Jake could hear sounds from the hallway. Other students talking in voices like music and wind and running water. None of them sounded like human voices. None of them sounded like home. Tomorrow he would start classes. Tomorrow he would try to make friends with beings who thought he was dangerous just for existing. Tomorrow he would learn what it meant to be a Deathworlder in a galaxy full of peaceful creatures. Jake closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but it took a long time. The bed was too soft, the air was too clean, and the silence was too complete. On Earth there was always some sound. Wind in the trees, cars on distant roads, the hum of air conditioning. Here there was nothing but the whisper of recycled air and the occasional sound of footsteps in the hall. He missed home already. Jake woke up early, long before the station's artificial sunrise began to brighten his window. His body still thought he was on Earth time, and he felt restless lying in the too soft bed. He got up and did some push-ups, trying to be quiet so he would not wake anyone else. The floor creaked under him with each push-up. Jake stopped after 20, worried that the sound might carry through the walls. On Earth, his morning routine included 100 push-ups, but here everything seemed so fragile. He took a shower in the small bathroom attached to his room. The water felt different, lighter somehow, and it took him a moment to realize the gravity was lower in the bathroom. The shower was designed for comfort, not the high-pressure blast he was used to at home. When he stepped out of his room, the hallway was empty except for one student. It was one of the crystal beings he had seen yesterday. The creature was about his height but looked like it weighed nothing at all. Its body caught the light from the walls and threw rainbow patterns everywhere. The crystal student saw Jake and froze. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Jake tried to smile and wave, but this made the crystal being make a sound like breaking glass. It hurried away so fast that Jake could hear its feet barely touching the floor. Jake sighed and headed toward the cafeteria. The halls were starting to fill with other students, but they all gave him plenty of space. Some pressed themselves against the walls as he passed. Others took different routes entirely. The cafeteria was a huge room with a dome ceiling that showed a view of space above. Students sat at tables that floated at different heights, each designed for different types of beings. Jake looked around, trying to figure out where humans were supposed to sit. A mechanical voice spoke from nowhere. "Jake Morrison, please proceed to Station 7 for nutritional requirements." Jake found Station 7, which was at normal table height. The food dispenser scanned him and provided what looked like normal breakfast food: eggs, toast, fruit, and juice. He sat down at the empty table and began to eat. Other students watched him from their floating tables. He could hear them whispering, though he could not understand most of the languages. A few spoke in English, thinking he could not hear them. "Look how much food it eats," said one voice like tinkling bells. "And those teeth," whispered another. "So many sharp teeth." Jake touched his mouth self-consciously. His teeth were just normal human teeth. He did not think they were particularly sharp. After breakfast, Jake found his way to the gymnasium. The door was twice as tall as he was and made of some kind of clear material. Inside, he could see a room so large he could not see the far wall. Students were already gathering, floating, or walking or sliding across the floor. Jake took a deep breath and walked in. The floor felt strange under his feet, soft and bouncy like thick foam. The ceiling was high above, covered with lights that looked like stars. Other students were spread out across the enormous space. Jake counted about 20 of them. There were the crystal beings, a group of creatures that looked like giant butterflies, with wings like stained glass, some blob-like students that seemed to be made of jelly, and others he had not seen before. They all stopped what they were doing when Jake entered. The silence was so complete, he could hear his own heartbeat. "Welcome, students," said a voice from above. Jake looked up and saw something that made him blink in surprise. The instructor looked like a giant spider, but instead of being scary, it was actually quite beautiful. Its body was covered in fur that shimmered like silk, and it had 8 long, graceful legs that moved with perfect coordination. "I am Instructor Zixthal," the spider being said as it lowered itself on a strand of silk. "Today we begin our physical wellness program with gentle movement exercises." Zixthal landed near the group of students but stayed far away from Jake. Even from across the room, Jake could see that the instructor was nervous. "We will start with basic stretching in reduced gravity," Zixthal announced. The room's gravity suddenly became much lighter, and Jake felt his feet barely touching the ground. The other students began moving in slow, flowing motions. It looked like a dance, each species moving in ways that matched their body type. The butterfly creatures opened and closed their wings slowly. The crystal beings rotated their bodies, sending light patterns across the walls. The jelly-like students stretched and flowed like water. Jake tried to copy their movements, but even his gentlest motions seemed too fast and too strong. When he raised his arms, the air movement made the butterfly students flutter nervously. When he took a step, the soft floor compressed under his weight and sent small vibrations through the room. One of the jelly students, a purple blob about the size of a beach ball, was closest to Jake. Each time Jake moved, the jelly creature jiggled and bounced like it was being shaken. "Perhaps," Zixthal called out nervously, "our human student could try smaller movements." Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he tried to move even more carefully. He barely lifted his arms, barely shifted his weight. But still, the other students seemed affected by his presence. "Excellent," Zixthal said, though the instructor's voice shook slightly. "Now we will move to our second activity. Today we will experience harmony swimming in our zero-gravity water sphere." A section of the floor opened up, and a perfect sphere of water rose into the air. It was about the size of a small house, just floating in the middle of the room without any container. Jake stared at it in amazement. "The water sphere provides perfect environment for gentle exercise," Zixthal explained. "Students enter one at a time and glide through the water using minimal energy. The goal is peaceful movement and inner calm." Zedum butterfly students went first, entering the water sphere and moving through it like they were flying through liquid air. Their wings barely moved, and they glided in perfect circles without disturbing the water at all. Next went the crystal students. They moved through the water like living prisms, their bodies refracting the light into beautiful patterns that danced through the sphere. Finally, it was Jake's turn. All the other students had moved to what they probably thought was a safe distance. Jake approached the water sphere carefully. "Remember," Zixthal called out, "gentle movements only. The sphere is very delicate." Jake nodded and stepped into the water. It felt warm and clean, different from any water he had ever been in. He tried to move the way the other students had, barely using his arms and legs, but even his gentlest swimming stroke was too much. The water around him began to move and swirl. Within seconds, what had been a peaceful sphere became a churning mass of water with Jake at the center. The water began to slosh and spin. Students who were still inside were swept along like leaves in a hurricane. Jake tried to stop moving, but that only made things worse. One of the butterfly students, a delicate creature with wings like blue glass, was caught in the current Jake had created. The water soaked her wings and she began to sink. Jake reached out to help her, but his movement created an even bigger wave. The butterfly student was thrown out of the sphere entirely, crashing into the soft wall with a wet thud. Her wings were completely waterlogged, and she slid down the wall, leaving a trail of water behind her. Emergency lights began flashing. Medical drones appeared from hidden panels in the walls and rushed toward the butterfly student. Alarms chimed softly, but urgently. Jake scrambled out of the water sphere, dripping and horrified. "I am sorry," he said to everyone and no one. "I did not mean to hurt anyone. I was trying to be gentle." The other students backed away from him even further. Some of them were making sounds of distress in their own languages. The crystal students were chiming like broken bells. The jelly creatures were vibrating with what looked like fear. Zixthal quickly lowered the water sphere back into the floor and hurried over to check on the injured butterfly student. The medical drones were already treating her, and she seemed to be okay, just shaken and unable to fly with wet wings. "Class dismissed," Zixthal announced. "Everyone please return to your dormitories." The students left quickly, some of them looking back at Jake with what he could only describe as terror. Jake stood alone in the middle of the enormous gymnasium, water dripping from his clothes onto the soft floor. He had been trying so hard to be careful, to be gentle, to fit in. But somehow he had still managed to hurt someone and terrify everyone else. Jake walked slowly back to his room, leaving wet footprints in the hallway. News about the water sphere accident spread through Harmony Station Academy, faster than Jake could have imagined. By the time he reached his room, his message device was already beeping with updates from the Academy's information network. "Butterfly, student injured in gym class," read one message. "Emergency protocols activated," said another. "Deathworlder involvement confirmed," announced a third. Jake sat on his bed and put his head in his hands. He had only been trying to swim gently, but somehow he had created a disaster. The butterfly student was okay according to the medical reports, but her wings would take days to dry completely. Over the next few hours, Jake noticed that the hallways became empty whenever he walked through them. Students who saw him coming would quickly duck into classrooms or take different routes. Some of the crystal beings actually made detours that took them to completely different levels of the station just to avoid crossing his path. During his regular classes, Jake sat alone. In galactic history, the professor placed him at a table by himself in the back corner. In basic mathematics, other students moved to seats as far away from him as possible. Even the floating desks seemed to drift away from him on their own. The worst part was that nobody was mean to him. They were just scared. Jake could see it in their eyes, the way they looked at him like he was a bomb that might go off at any moment. 3 days passed like this. Jake ate alone, studied alone, and walked through empty hallways. He was starting to think about asking to go back to Earth when his schedule showed another gym class. Jake almost did not go. He stood outside his room for 10 minutes, staring at the message device that reminded him about physical education. Maybe he could pretend to be sick. Maybe he could skip class and nobody would notice. But Jake had never skipped a class in his life, and he was not going to start now. He took a deep breath and walked to the gymnasium. When he arrived, the other students were already there, but they had arranged themselves as far from the entrance as possible. Instructor Zixthal was hanging from the ceiling, probably trying to stay out of reach. "Welcome back, Jake," Zixthal said, though the spider instructor's voice shook a little. "Today we will try something different, something safer." Jake nodded and walked carefully to an empty spot on the floor. Even his footsteps seemed too loud in the huge room. "Today we will practice gentle running around our exercise track," Zixthal announced. "The track is designed for low-impact movement. Students should maintain a pace that promotes inner peace and physical harmony." Jake looked at the track that circled the gymnasium. It was made of the same soft, bouncy material as the floor, and it was wide enough for several students to run, side by side. The goal is not speed, Zixthal continued, but mindful movement. Think of it as moving meditation. The butterfly students went first, their wings carrying them just above the track surface. They moved so slowly that Jake could barely tell they were moving at all. It looked more like floating than flying. Next came the crystal students, who ran with steps so light they made no sound at all. Their bodies caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls as they moved around the track. The jelly students rolled rather than ran, flowing around the track like colorful puddles in slow motion. The tree-like students walked with steps that looked like a gentle dance. Finally, it was Jake's turn. All the other students had finished their laps and were watching from what they probably considered a safe distance. Jake stepped onto the track and tried to remember everything he had learned about moving gently. He started with what he thought was the slowest jog possible, barely lifting his feet, trying to run like he was moving through thick honey. But even his slowest movement was too fast. Within seconds, he was gaining on the crystal students who were still on their second lap. Jake tried to slow down even more, but that felt so unnatural that he almost fell over. In desperation, Jake tried running backward. At least that way he would not catch up to anyone. But even running backward, he was still moving faster than the other students running forward. Jake found himself in the strange situation of jogging backward around the track while lapping students who were running forward as fast as they could. It was embarrassing and confusing, and he could hear the other students making worried sounds as he passed them again and again. Zixthal was hanging from the ceiling, turning to follow Jake's progress around the track. Perhaps, the instructor called out, "Our human student could try running in place?" Jake was about to respond when the station's emergency alarm began to sound. It was not the soft chimes that had played during the water sphere incident. This was a loud, urgent wailing that made the walls vibrate. "Emergency evacuation," announced a voice over the station's communication system. "All students and staff, report to Central Core immediately. Meteor shower detected, impact in 15 minutes. The gymnasium erupted into panic. Students began moving toward the exits, but Jake could see immediately that there was a problem. The exits were designed for the station's usual inhabitants, and most of the students were not built for emergency evacuations. The butterfly students tried to fly toward the exits, but their wings were not strong enough to carry them quickly through the air. The jelly students were trying to roll faster, but they kept bumping into each other and getting stuck. The crystal students were moving as fast as they could, but their delicate bodies were not designed for speed. Jake watched the chaos and felt something change inside him. These students might be afraid of him, but they were in danger, real danger, and he was the only one in the room who was built for emergencies. Jake stopped trying to be gentle. He ran to the nearest group of butterfly students, who scattered in terror when they saw him coming. But instead of hurting them, Jake carefully scooped up 3 of them at once, holding them against his chest like he was carrying fragile packages. "Hold on," he told them, and ran toward the exit. The butterfly students were too surprised to struggle. Jake moved faster than any of them had ever seen a living being move, but his hands were steady and careful. He reached the exit in seconds and gently set the butterfly students down in the hallway. "Stay here," he told them, and ran back into the gymnasium. The crystal students were next. They tried to run away from him, but Jake was faster. He gathered them up, 4 at a time, and carried them to safety. Their bodies were even lighter than the butterfly students, and Jake was careful not to squeeze too hard. Back and forth Jake went, carrying students to safety. The jelly students were easy to pick up, though they jiggled nervously in his arms. The tree-like students were heavier, but Jake carried 2 at once without slowing down. Each time he returned to the gymnasium, there were fewer students left. Each time he ran to the exit, he could hear the emergency announcement counting down the time until impact. 10 minutes until meteor contact. Jake found a group of students trapped behind a piece of equipment that had fallen during the panic. It was a metal barrier that normally moved aside automatically, but the emergency had caused it to malfunction. The students behind it were too small and weak to move it themselves. Jake grabbed the barrier with both hands and lifted it out of the way. It weighed as much as a small car, but Jake moved it like it was made of cardboard. The trapped students stared at him in amazement before running toward the exit. 5 minutes until meteor contact. Jake was carrying the last group of students when he heard Instructor Zixthal calling for help. The spider instructor was trapped under a piece of ceiling that had fallen. Jake could see that Zixthal was injured, one of her legs bent at an odd angle. Jake set down the students he was carrying and told them to run. Then he went to help his instructor. The piece of ceiling was huge, bigger than Jake himself, but he got his hands under it and lifted it up, his muscles straining with the effort. Zixthal crawled out from underneath and Jake carefully lowered the debris back down. "Thank you," Zixthal whispered. Jake picked up his instructor as gently as he could and ran for the exit. Zixthal weighed almost nothing, and Jake was careful not to jostle her injured leg. They reached the central core just as the meteor shower began to hit the outer sections of the station. Jake could hear the impacts echoing through the walls, but they were safe in the heavily protected core. Jake looked around at all the students he had carried to safety. They were all there, all alive, all uninjured except for Zixthal's hurt leg. For the first time since he had arrived at the academy, Jake felt like he had done something right. The other students were looking at him too, but their expressions had changed. They still looked nervous, but there was something else in their eyes now. Something that might have been the beginning of respect. The butterfly student whose wings had been soaked 3 days ago flew up to Jake. She hovered in front of his face for a moment, then gently touched his cheek with one delicate wing. "Thank you," she said in a voice like music. The meteor shower lasted for 3 hours. Jake sat with the other students in the central core, a massive room with walls thick enough to protect them from anything space could throw at the station. Emergency lights cast everything in a soft, blue glow, and the air recycling systems hummed quietly. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Jake was not sitting alone. The butterfly student whose wings he had saved days ago sat nearby, along with 2 of the crystal beings he had carried to safety. They did not talk much, but they were not running away from him either. Instructor Zixthal was being treated by medical drones for her injured leg. She kept looking over at Jake with an expression he could not read. It was not fear anymore, but it was not quite friendship either. When the all-clear signal finally sounded, students began to file out of the central core to return to their normal activities. Jake waited until most of them had left before getting up to go. He did not want to cause another crowd problem. "Jake Morrison," said a familiar voice. Administrator Veltar was standing near the exit, her starlight body flickering more than usual. "Please come with me." Jake followed Veltar through hallways he had not seen before, deeper into the administrative section of the station. They passed offices with doors that looked like they were made of solid light, and rooms filled with floating screens showing data from across the galaxy. They stopped at a door marked with symbols Jake could not read. Inside was a small theater, with rows of seats facing a large screen. Veltar gestured for Jake to sit down. "We need to discuss what happened today," Veltar said. Her voice sounded different, less nervous than before. The station's security cameras recorded everything that occurred during the evacuation. The screen lit up, showing the gymnasium from above. Jake watched himself moving around the track, running backward while the other students struggled to keep up. Then came the emergency alarm and Jake saw the panic that followed. But watching it from above, Jake could see things he had missed while it was happening. He could see how the other students had no idea what to do. He could see how their bodies were simply not built for emergencies. He could see how, without help, some of them might not have made it to safety in time. Then he watched himself stop trying to be gentle and start trying to save lives. On the screen, his movements looked different than they felt. He looked fast and strong, but also careful and protective. Every time he picked up a student, he held them like they were made of glass. Every step he took was placed to avoid bumping into others. The other administrators were quite concerned when they saw this recording, Veltar said. "Some wanted to send you back to Earth immediately." Jake's heart sank. He had tried so hard to fit in, and now they were going to send him home anyway. "However," Veltar continued, I convinced them to let me show this recording to our students first. I think they need to understand something important about Deathworlders. The next day, Veltar called a special assembly. All the students gathered. In the main auditorium, a huge room with seats that could adjust to fit any type of being. Jake sat in the front row, feeling hundreds of eyes watching him. Veltar took the stage, her starlight body glowing brighter than usual. "Students of Harmony Station Academy," she began. "Today we are going to learn about something that most of you have never encountered before. We are going to learn about death worlds." A massive screen descended from the ceiling, showing an image of space with different colored dots representing star systems. Most of the dots were green or blue, but a few were marked in red. "The galaxy contains thousands of worlds where intelligent life has developed," Veltar explained. "Most of these worlds are what we call Class 1 or Class 2 environments. They are peaceful places with gentle weather, friendly wildlife, and stable conditions that allow civilization to grow without constant struggle." The screen zoomed in on some of the green and blue dots, showing beautiful worlds with crystal cities and floating gardens. Jake recognized some of them as the home worlds he had heard other students talk about. "But a few worlds are different," Veltar continued. "These are Class 10, 11, or 12 worlds. We call them death worlds because everything about them is designed to kill the life that grows there." The screen changed to show a red dot growing larger. Jake realized with a shock that it was Earth. "Earth is a Class 12 death world," Veltar said. "The highest classification we have. Let me show you what this means." Images of Earth began to appear on the screen. Not the beautiful pictures that Jake was used to seeing, but images chosen to show how dangerous his home planet really was. There were pictures of hurricanes that could destroy entire cities, tornadoes that could pick up buildings and throw them around like toys, earthquakes that could split the ground open and swallow everything above. There were pictures of volcanoes spitting liquid rock into the sky, lightning storms that could kill with a single bolt, floods that could wash away everything in their path. But then came the pictures of Earth's wildlife, and Jake heard the students in the auditorium make sounds of terror. There were lions with claws and teeth designed for killing, sharks with mouths full of razor-sharp teeth, bears that weighed as much as small vehicles, snakes with poison that could kill in minutes. "And this is just the beginning," Veltar said. "Earth's gravity is more than 10 times stronger than most of your home worlds. The atmosphere contains gases that would be poisonous to most of you. The weather changes so rapidly that beings from stable worlds cannot adapt." Jake looked around at his fellow students. They were staring at the images with expressions of horror and disbelief. Some of the more delicate species looked like they might faint just from seeing pictures of Earth's dangers. "Now," Veltar said, "I want you to understand something very important. Humans did not just survive on this death world. They became the dominant species. They learned to hunt the predators that hunted them. They learned to build cities that could withstand the storms. They learned to travel across oceans filled with deadly creatures and climb mountains that could kill them with cold or lack of air." The screen changed to show images of human cities, human explorers, human athletes. Jake saw pictures of people, rock climbing, deep-sea diving, running marathons, and doing other things that he had always thought of as normal recreation. Every human alive today is the descendant of billions of years of survival on a world that never stopped trying to kill them, Veltar continued. Their bodies are built for strength, speed, and endurance that would be impossible on gentler worlds. Their reflexes are designed to react to dangers that most of us cannot even imagine. Jake felt his face burning with embarrassment, but also with something else. For the first time, he was beginning to understand why everyone had been so afraid of him. "But here is the most important thing," Veltar said, and her voice became warmer. "Despite coming from a world of constant danger, despite having bodies built for survival and combat, humans are not violent beings. Watch this." The screen showed the security footage from the emergency evacuation. But this time, Veltar narrated what was happening. When danger threatened, Jake Morrison did not think about his own safety first. He did not use his superior speed and strength to escape alone. Instead, he used every advantage his death world evolution gave him to protect beings who were weaker than himself. Jake watched himself on the screen, carrying student after student to safety. He saw how carefully he held each one, how he made sure they were safe before going back for others. This is what humans call heroism, Veltar said. Using strength to protect the weak, using speed to help the slow, using the gifts that evolution gave them not for conquest but for compassion. The auditorium was completely silent. Jake could not hear even the smallest sound from any of the students. Jake Morrison is not dangerous because he is strong, Veltar concluded. He is safe because he is good. His strength makes him a protector, not a predator. His speed makes him a rescuer, not a threat. When the assembly ended, Jake walked slowly back toward his dormitory. But this time the hallways did not empty when he appeared. Students still gave him space, but they did not run away. Some of them even nodded to him as he passed. The butterfly student whose wings had been soaked in the water sphere flew up to him in the hallway. Jake stopped walking, not sure what to expect. "I want to know about Earth," she said in her musical voice. "Will you tell me about your homeworld?" For the first time since arriving at Harmony Station Academy, Jake smiled a real smile. "I would like that," he said, "but maybe we should start with the nice parts first." The butterfly student laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I think I am brave enough for the scary parts too," she said. As they walked toward the common area together, Jake realized that something had changed. He was still the only human at the academy, still the only Deathworlder among beings from peaceful worlds. But now he was not alone anymore. He was beginning to make friends. 3 weeks after the assembly, Jake's life at Harmony Station Academy had changed completely. Students no longer ran away when they saw him coming. Instead, they asked him questions about Earth, about humans, and about what it was like to live on a death world. The butterfly student, whose name was Krinala, had become his first real friend. She often sat with him at lunch, asking him to tell stories about Earth's mountains and oceans and storms. At first, Jake worried that these stories would scare her, but Krinala seemed fascinated by the idea of a world where life had to be so strong just to survive. "On my world," she told him one day, "the most dangerous thing is a flower that makes you sneeze if you smell it too long. I cannot imagine living somewhere with bears and hurricanes." Jake laughed. "You get used to it. Most of the time Earth is actually quite beautiful and peaceful. The dangerous parts just make the safe parts feel more special." Other students began joining their conversations. Blubton, one of the purple jelly students, liked to hear about Earth's oceans. The crystal students wanted to know about Earth's mountains and caves. Even some of the tree-like students asked about Earth's forests. Jake found himself becoming an unofficial teacher about Deathworld survival. Students would ask him questions like, "How do humans stay safe during storms?" Or, "What do you do if you meet a dangerous animal?" Jake answered as best he could, though he sometimes had to explain that most humans never actually fought bears or ran from hurricanes. Then came the announcement that made everything even more interesting. "Attention students." Administrator Veltar's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "The annual Interspecies Athletic Championship will begin next week. All students are encouraged to participate and demonstrate the unique abilities of their species." Jake had heard about the championship from other students. Each year, the different species at the academy showed off their natural talents. The crystal beings created beautiful light displays. The butterfly students performed aerial dances. The jelly students did amazing shape-changing demonstrations. Jake did not plan to participate. He was still worried about accidentally hurting someone or breaking something. But during lunch that day, Krinala flew over to his table with an excited expression. "Jake, you have to enter the championship," she said, her wings fluttering rapidly. "I do not think that is a good idea," Jake replied. "What if I hurt someone again?" "But that is exactly why you should enter," said Blubton, rolling over to join the conversation. "We want to see what a Deathworlder can really do when he is not holding back." More students gathered around Jake's table. This was something that would have been impossible a month ago, but now it felt natural. "We have all seen you trying to be gentle," said one of the crystal students, her voice chiming like bells. "But we have never seen you being yourself. Show us what humans are really capable of," added one of the tree students, his leaves rustling with excitement. Jake looked around at all the eager faces. These beings who had once been terrified of him were now asking him to demonstrate their very abilities that had scared them. "Are you sure?" Jake asked. "It might be pretty intense." "We are sure," Krinala said firmly. "We trust you." Those 3 words hit Jake harder than he expected. "We trust you." After weeks of being feared and avoided, his fellow students now trusted him enough to want to see him at full strength. "Okay," Jake said. "I will do it." The championship took place in the Academy's largest space, a huge arena that could be configured for different types of activities. Hundreds of students filled the floating seats that surrounded the central performance area. Jake watched the other performances with genuine admiration. The crystal students created a light show that painted the entire arena in moving rainbows. The butterfly students performed an aerial ballet that looked like living poetry. The jelly students flowed together into amazing sculptures that changed shape like liquid art. Each performance was beautiful and showed abilities that Jake could never hope to match. He began to wonder what he could possibly do that would be worth watching. Then it was his turn. Jake walked to the center of the arena, feeling hundreds of eyes watching him. Administrator Veltar's voice echoed through the space. "Representing the Deathworld Earth and the human species, Jake Morrison will demonstrate physical capabilities developed through evolutionary pressure." Jake had planned what he wanted to do, but standing in the center of the arena, he felt nervous. What if this was a mistake? What if seeing him at full strength scared everyone again? Then he saw Krinala in the crowd, giving him an encouraging wave. Blubbeton was bouncing excitedly in his seat. Even Instructor Zixthal, whose leg had healed completely, was watching with interest rather than fear. Jake took a deep breath and stopped holding back. He started with basic exercises but performed them at normal human intensity. He did 50 push-ups in less than a minute, his movements smooth and controlled. The crowd made amazed sounds as they watched him lift his entire body weight with just his arms, over and over, faster than most of them could even move. Next, Jake demonstrated human running speed. The arena's track appeared, and Jake ran around it at what he considered a moderate pace. To the watching students, he looked like a blur. He completed a full lap in seconds, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. But the real demonstration came when Jake showed them human strength. The arena provided a series of weights, starting with objects that most species could barely lift. Jake picked them up easily with one hand, then moved to heavier and heavier objects. The final weight was a solid metal block that took 3 maintenance robots to position. It weighed more than a small vehicle. Jake approached it carefully, got a good grip, and lifted it over his head. The crowd fell completely silent. But Jake was not done. While holding the massive weight above his head, he began to walk around the arena, showing that this incredible feat of strength was not just a momentary burst of power, but something he could sustain. When he finally set the weight down gently, the arena erupted in cheers. But these were not screams of terror. They were sounds of amazement and appreciation. "However," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the arena, "the most important human ability is not strength or speed." The arena fell quiet again. "The most important ability is cooperation," Jake continued. "Humans survived on a death world not just because we were strong, but because we worked together. We helped each other. We protected those who needed protection." Jake gestured to the crowd. "I want to show you what humans and other species can do together." What followed was something that had never been done at the Academy before. Jake organized impromptu rescue scenarios, showing how different species' abilities could work together. With human physical capabilities, Krinala's ability to fly combined with Jake's strength made them perfect for reaching high places. Blubton's ability to squeeze through small spaces paired perfectly with Jake's ability to move heavy obstacles. The crystal students could provide light in dark places, while Jake provided the muscle to clear paths. Even the tree students got involved, using their ability to remain perfectly still as anchor points while Jake climbed or swung from their branches. For the first time in the Academy's history, the athletic championship became a cooperative event instead of a competitive one. Students who had never worked together before discovered that their different abilities made them stronger as a team. The championship ended with all the participants standing together in the center of the arena while the crowd cheered. Jake stood, with his arms around Kreenala and Bluebaton, surrounded by friends he had never expected to have. Later that evening, Jake was in his room packing for a field trip that instructor Zix Thal had organized. It was going to be a visit to a slightly dangerous planet where students could practice the survival skills Jake had been teaching them. His message device chimed with an incoming communication from Earth. It was from his parents, asking how the cultural exchange program was going. Jake looked out his window at the stars, then at the pictures on his desk. Pictures of him and his new friends. Pictures from the championship. Pictures from their practice sessions where other students learned basic Earth survival techniques like how to walk on uneven ground and what to do if it rains. He started typing his response. The cultural exchange is going better than I ever imagined. I think I am helping them understand humans, and they are definitely helping me understand the galaxy. We are planning an expedition to explore what they call a dangerous planet. By Earth standards, it is basically a nice camping trip, but for them it will be the adventure of a lifetime. I think they are starting to understand that being different does not mean being dangerous. It just means being useful in different ways. Jake paused, then added, I am not the scary monster they thought I was. And they are not the fragile creatures I thought they were. We are all just students learning from each other. I think that is what the galaxy needs more of. He sent the message and looked out at the stars again. Tomorrow he would lead his friends on their first real adventure. They would face challenges that seemed impossible to them but normal to him. And together, they would prove that the most powerful force in the galaxy was not strength or speed or any special ability. It was friendship.